Whitewashing of indigenous children has been going on for almost 200 years now. This has been an effort to completely rid the cultures and identity of the indigenous children. In today's show, we will talk about the 60 scoop, and here you see an early Indian school right here in this video. This is a shame, folks. Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Metis Warrior here with Timothy and Alexandria.
Hello everybody.
And so today we're going to have a special guest with us, Shirleylee Shields, and she is a 60 scoop survivor. And for y'all that don't know, this happened way before the 60s as well. 60 scoop is something that is known to have happened in Canada, but this has been going on actually since colonial times, since they've been trying to whitewash the natives and change their religion, change their culture. It's a serious issue. As you've seen in the very beginning and the opening of the show, the actual video of an Indian day school where the whitewashing will begin with the children.
And really, Shirleylee Shields, her story begins when she was only 3 years old and she was removed from her home, and her heart-wrenching story is really going to pull on your heartstrings. She is just one of so many that horrific things have happened to, and you're going to hear it right from Shirleylee Shields herself. She also discusses the Holdeman Mennonite church, and we'll let her get more into her personal story on being removed at the age of 3.
And so if you look at the 60 scoop, as I said before, the 60 scoop refers to a practice that occurred in Canada of taking or scooping up indigenous children from their families and communities for placement in foster homes or adoption. Now this did happen to Shirleylee Shields. She is a survivor, and her story, you're going to hear from her directly, her story. And it's encouraging to get other survivors to actually get their stories out there and actually talk too. But let's look a little bit more into this. Okay, so Canada's residential school system was implemented by the federal government and administered by various churches. Its purpose was to educate Aboriginal children in Euro-Canadian and Christian values so they could become part of mainstream society. Now, a lot of the Christian values that's been forced on the people, really that was a shame, because those were not true Christian values to snatch children out of their home and say the way that their ancestors and their parents and people in their family was worshiping was wrong, because Jesus himself, as we said before, did not come for anybody but the lost sheep of Israel, the lost children of Israel. That's where he came from. That's in the Bible. That's what he came for, and that's in the Bible. So obviously he died for the sins of everyone, but clearly he came for the lost children of Israel. So what was our native ancestors doing correctly, and why did people who was grafted onto the tree think it was important to snatch children out and force these values and this Christian religion on them? I'm not speaking against Christianity, because I myself am a Christian. However, I do participate in some of the native ceremonies as well, and I do have a lot of native beliefs as well, and the similarities there between the natives' beliefs and the Christian beliefs are very similar, actually, if you look deeply into it. And they didn't even know that. They were just worshiping the Great Spirit and the Great Creator. So this attempt to whitewash the children and get rid of any native identity and make them white was completely wrong. And so this is something that we're dealing with in today's show. If you take a look at your screen, A World Within a World and My Son, that is 2 different books by Shirley. and we highly recommend that you grab up those books, and she'll tell you how you can purchase them in the interview. So here we go. Okay, everybody, we got Shirleylee Shields joining us now, and we'd like to welcome you to the show. Shirley, how are you doing?
Thank you. I am very well, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
And I appreciate you joining us. And what we're going to talk about today is the 60s scoop. And you have a personal story to tell about that yourself. And if we could just go ahead and let people know your personal story concerning the 60s scoop.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I have a story to tell. I was 3 years old when I was removed from my home in Manitoba, and I was placed in foster care till I was 10 years old, actually, within a very strict society called the Holdeman Mennonite religious people in Roblin, Manitoba.
Right.
So they raised me. Yes, they raised me, and it was an incredible, strict dictatorship. No radio, no television, no higher education. The list was endless. Women were seen and not heard. Men were the dictatorship of the household. And so I was the 11th child. They had 10 children of their own. So my dad used to call me his little butterfly because I was outside with him all the time.
Right.
And regardless of the religion that my father lived and the path that he chose, I have never not honored him. He is and was my hero. And today he is an energy that brings me love and light. He is constantly around me, my guardian angel. So,
hey, before you get started, Shirley,
questions.
Before you get started, and I know we're about to go into the 60 scoop, but there's a lot of people out there that doesn't understand what the Mennonites is. Could you explain briefly what it was like to live in a Mennonite community there?
Absolutely. So, being raised in Roblin, Manitoba, we had a private school, we had a private functional church. You became a member when you accepted Christ as your personal Savior. Then you were allowed to fellowship with the people. The women all wore black head coverings on their heads. The men have beards. The women wear dresses. There's no pants. There's no jewelry. There is no makeup. It is the Holdeman people were united at one time with the Kleindigemeinde Mennonite, which have moved to Mexico and Ontario and different places. But they split years ago and have followed the John Holdeman teachings, so thus they are called the Holdeman Mennonites. It is a very strict religion. It is based on the King James Version Bible, but unfortunately they have chosen their doctrines and their religion to be followed by a set of rules dictated by the ministers and deacons rather than what I like to say is following the true spirit.
Right. Could you, before we go further, are you able to, are you able to tell us or the listeners why at 3 years old you were removed from your home, or is that something you'd like to not discuss?
Oh no, I've also written 2 books. I'll get into that a little bit later, but no, so I was 3, taken, and I was actually placed in the hospital for, I believe, a week, because my youngest brother and we were living with our parents in Roblin, the little town of Roblin, Manitoba. My father was working up north, my biological dad. His name was, the French name, or the Cree name together, I don't know, was Herman Majel Bercier, so we called him Herman Bercier. He was my father. So he was working up north in the bush there in Manitoba, and he came home, and we were gone. The youngest 2 were gone, us children. So I was taken to the hospital because my brother and I had gotten into, I don't know if we took aspirin, but we took some pills that we weren't supposed to have. So as I'm in, immediately when you're taken to the hospital and removed from a home, social services is involved.
Right.
And that was the case with me. Social services were involved. So I remember being told, later, years ago, I tracked down the social worker. I won't say his name, but I tracked him down, and he said, I drove around for a full day with you in the vehicle trying to find a home for you. I'm like, what? Really?
Wow.
How nice to tell me that and make me feel like I was not worthy. Nobody wanted me.
That's
so
awful.
The last family that took me, my dad fell in love with me. And I believe in fate. I believe in, everything that happens for a reason. And here I was placed in this home. I was 3 years old. And I remember it clear to this day, coming there and meeting the family. And when the gentleman asked me, are you okay to stay here? I said, yeah, I'll be fine. And he drove away.
Wow.
And there I was, 3 years old.
You know what? And I'm glad you said that, because I was having a discussion with Alexandria. I have a memory of when I was 3 years old and I was severely abused, and I was hiding in a bush, and I remember this vividly. And Alexandria was thinking, how can anybody remember something from the age of 3? And now here you are. I think when something that significant in your life happens, be it positive or negative, that memory is always going to stay with you.
Absolutely. I believe that children are incredibly gifted with remembering things, whether it's like any traumatic experience or any adrenaline high. I think they remember those things. They stay in the brain, and they remain with you. And so I grew up completely unaware that my biological father lived 15 minutes from me.
Oh.
And many uncles and aunts and cousins, they were all within 15 minutes to an hour and a half, and I did not know that at all.
Wow, that's unreal. That's unreal.
Yeah, we're sorry to hear that happen to you, and but it seems like you got in, at least initially, there with a great family, and yeah, I don't know what to say, really.
Well, I cannot say anything. I had a fabulous childhood till I turned 10, when I began to see, and I knew I didn't belong there. I knew that I was meant for other things than this, but I loved my father, and I write about it in my book a lot. I tell my whole story, but as I got older and I realized what I was living in, and then in 1978 or 79, they pulled all of the Holdeman children out of the public school system. So that was immensely traumatic for all of these Holdeman children that had been going to the public school system to be pulled out and placed in a little one-room private school right across Canada. Every Holdeman congregation pulled their children out of the public school system and placed them in private schools. So now your whole curriculum changes, and it's culture shock. It really is, because you may be going to church every Sunday and every Wednesday for Bible study, or even twice on Sundays for different meetings, and then you have 3 weeks of revivals every single winter that you have to attend. So, but here now you're pulled out of the public school system, and everything that you're learning is completely changed.
Well, let me ask you this right here in this part of the show before we go on to the 60 Scoop here. Because you did say you wrote about this in a book, and I would like to is the book still for sale out there? Can we show it in the show and have people buy it if they want?
Absolutely. So my first book is called A World Within a World, and I write my life story about fighting for children because the church took my children, and my whole life story is in this book. And I do talk about I fought for my freedom and what that all cost me, and I did get sole custody, and that I am the only woman in Canada and United States to have taken this society, this sect of people, the Holdeman Mennonite people, to the Court of Queen's Bench in Edmonton, Manitoba on September 7th, 1997. I won my divorce, my sole custody of my children, and my freedom.
Let me ask you, the book. I'm sorry. The book's called A World Within a World, and where can people purchase this book at?
Well, I had it in a lot of bookstores, but I have just been selling. You can find me on Facebook. You can email me at shirleylee5@gmail.com.
Okay, awesome.
And you can put that on the webs. That's, on the message too. But definitely, and then I wrote a second book called My Son, because the church kept my son from me for 10 years. I didn't see him for 10 years. So my second book is about my son.
So,
and the same thing.
Talking about that, Shirley, I mean, what you've gone through from the age of 3, a lot of people would say, I mean, you can hear the strength in your voice and your resilience, and you're always so positive, and a lot of people might say, well, she's gone through this horrific or a very difficult journey since the age of 3, and I mean, a lot of people, you couldn't weather that storm, and I think it's a testament on how strong of a soul and a human being you are, because there is an old saying, even my own father used to say, well, God only gives you the challenges he figures that you can withstand, but good God, I mean, you've got a lot of strength, and I think your story should empower people for resilience and not to give up. And I mean, there's always some good coming out of bad, but what you've had to endure in your life is just, I can't even begin to even wrap my head around.
Well, thank you, Alexandria, for those kind words. I wouldn't be the woman I am today had I not had the joy and the horror that I lived through. I mean, I never was planning on writing my life story, and I graduated from college, Grant MacEwan, in 2005. I went back to school. I got all my higher education. I took mental health through Aboriginal Connections at Grant MacEwan College, and I had people say, you need to write your story. And I'm like, who's going to believe this? Nobody's going to believe it. This is still going on today. This way of life, this control, this dictatorship. And yes, times have changed, and some of the churches have become a little bit more lenient within the Holdeman people, but it's ultimately still the same hypocrisy. I'll just be very blunt. It's plain hypocrisy. And I used to tell my adopted family, I said, when you actually live 2 Corinthians chapter 13, the love chapter, then talk to me. Because I'm expelled from the church. I don't eat with them. I'm shunned. I'm going to hell. My children are going to hell with me because I have removed them. And how you sit in judgment of another human being has forever stayed with me. And my father... father taught.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Shirley.
My adopted father taught me one thing, and that was unconditional love. It didn't matter to him who I was and where I was living and how I was living. He simply loved me. He loved my soul, and I think that is one of the things that I have carried with me right till now. He has been a constant reminder of unconditional love.
Yeah, and what I would say is, what I was going to say here is, is somebody. I am a preacher, ordained reverend in the Christian community, and what I would say is this: unless those people are Hebrews or Jewish, they were grafted onto the tree of Christianity, which means Christ himself said he died for the whole world, right? But he didn't come for the whole world initially. He died for the whole world. So I don't see how those people can tell you that you're going to hell, because our native ancestors were not worshiping the wrong way. If you look at, they had repentance. They had a lot of similar traditions without even knowing it. This in the Old Testament Bible and even in the New Testament Bible. And so it's for them to say that you're going to hell is just completely wrong, because these are people that are grafted onto that tree of Christianity, and they should not be judging anybody and telling anybody they're going to hell. That's wrong.
Well, I would let you have that argument with them, because trust me, I've had many discussions and debates on many different things with my adopted family. And regardless how they live today, I mean, they were part of my life. I love them. I always will love them. But that is not my journey anymore. And you know, as I began to find out and discover who my biological family was, and began to meet my family, and I've come full circle. And it is absolutely wonderful to be able to have known my adopted family, that way of life, and then to have found my history and begin to meet relatives and people. And when I realized that I was able, and I enjoyed public speaking, and you know, Ottawa flew me a couple of times to Winnipeg, and I worked with I listened to the stories of the 60 Scoop survivors there, and my heart was broken, because I understood their horror, their abuse, their pain, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, financially, and to stand on the precipice myself and come back and realize what power we carry within. I wanted nothing more than to be able to talk about this loss of identity, and how do we bridge that massive chasm of the loss of identity to finding who you are, where you belong. That's all we want on this planet, is to know that we matter and that we have value.
Absolutely. And what you touched on, your journey, and people have in their journey have taken maybe a detour or a slightly different path, but they've ended up at the same precipice. I mean, I did myself. I mean, I spent almost half of my whole life not knowing that I was Métis, but for a different reason, because my parents didn't want me to be teased, didn't want me to be beat up or be called, you know, an Indian or all that. So they thought it was in their best interest to keep it from me, to try and protect me. And I mean, I was angry for a while, because I thought I really didn't know who I was. I was standing there at some point in my life saying, okay, I've lived almost half my life not being, you know, not my culture, and you know, it being taken away from me, and they thought they were doing a right thing, but I felt robbed and I felt cheated, because I sort of didn't know where I belonged. And I think we all want a sense of belonging, or to know where we fit in this massive universe.
Oh, totally. And you know, do we want to run into the fire and save everybody? Yeah, we'd love to, but you know what? Eventually it comes down to your own personal, what do you want? And I know that there were many people at those meetings in Winnipeg who are older already, like they're in their 60s, and they're just learning about finding that freedom and that sense of being able to share their stories. And this is what I cannot stress enough. We need to have time. We need to have a place where people can share what they have gone through with the 60 Scoop, survive the Métis, and also, I mean, First Nations too. But I'm just talking about the Métis right now. There, you know, it's a year and a half ago I spoke in Edmonton, and it's, again, it's okay to talk, because I will listen. I don't have all the answers, but I sure can listen to you and help you understand that you aren't the only one.
Hey, Shirley.
We have, yes.
For the younger people out there that is not aware of what the 60 Scoop is, can you give them a little bit of description on this, and actually let them know how this actually connected with you?
Absolutely. So, as being a 3-year-old removed from my home without the parents' permission, and being placed in foster care and then adopted, my adoption was sealed. And I was told by vital statistics that they don't ever need to give me my birth certificate, my original birth certificate. I said, well, yeah, actually you do. And they said, no, we don't. We will give you a live birth registration. So again, many children who were removed from their home, whatever the social services or whoever it was decided, either the parents were too poor to look after them, either there was alcohol abuse, which more cases than not, it was poverty.
Right.
The 60 scoop will just take them away and place them in good homes. And unfortunately, many of these homes were foster homes that really it was just another dollar on the plate for the couple or the people that took you in. So we became the 60 scoop. So they have been taking children, Métis children, 50,000 of them from 1960 up till 1990.
That's a
There are still
long period of time.
That's just atrocious. And, you know, they are still red flagging Métis women in their hospitals when they have children. And I'm like, they're doing what? And it was actually a young lawyer from Vancouver that was speaking, and she said that, I don't want to have children because my mother was red flagged. Her children were taken away from her in the 60 scoop.
That's
And
unreal.
it's unreal. And I am red flagged, she said, so that means the possibility of they can just come in and take my children.
That's
so
just unreal.
This has to stop.
It does. It really does.
So my wish is to be even more of an advocate for the 60 scoop survivors in Alberta here and right across Canada. And I will never stop talking about how this affects a child when you remove them and place them with someone who knows nothing about their culture, who knows nothing about, you know, I was this little heathen child that they were going to make into a good little Christian girl. And I was fair-skinned, so I had big blue eyes and blonde curls. I didn't look Indian. So the advantage was even greater for me to just, for them to train me how they wanted to.
Exactly.
I call it brainwashing.
I actually got a video of that. When the natives were scooped up, the native children. I have a video I'm actually going to put in this show. So people, by the time they see this show, they've already seen that video. But they're actually coming out of one of the schools where they've been taken from their tribes and they're being whitewashed. But the kids, when they're coming out of this building, they're smiling and jumping and playing. But I'm thinking they were being directed to do that by the guy that was operating the camera at the time. And it was it's sick to think that they were trying to force something on people that already had a deeper connection with the Creator than what I believe a lot of Christians have.
Well, I don't really care what people call it or think of greatness work that they're doing. It is abuse. That's exactly what it is. To remove a child without permission is illegal, immoral, and that is abuse.
Absolutely, because by what authority are they doing that? And I mean, the more I hear personal stories about 60 scoop, homelessness, and all these other atrocities that are happening in Canada, I can't understand why this was allowed to happen. And I mean, Canada, people say Canada is so great, this and that, but I mean, we have a very dark history that, like you said, people have to talk about it. We have to have people say their stories. They have to say their piece, because we have to, I mean, what's written in the history books we know is not always true, is not true. I mean, these people, their lives matter. They're human beings, and we should know what happened to them, and they should be able to speak freely and to let, I mean, you can't heal if your pain is bottled up and you're keeping everything inside of you. Any kind of counseling will tell you that to keep things bottled up inside you, you can't begin to, you're not going to forget, but you have to start to heal a little bit and sort of maybe evolve from all that trauma and tragedy.
Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. You know, and people heal in very many different ways. And, you know, I see so much where people are wanting to heal, but they have simply turned either to medication, to the bottle, to the drugs, whatever it is. And that is not the answer. But when you don't have somebody that wants to hear you, really hear you, and listen to you, your soul's light begins to grow dim. So, to me, it is beyond time. It's way past time that we have not stepped forward and made these changes. And I remember saying in Winnipeg, look, I said, let me go to these towns. Let us gather up all of these social services files, and whatever files, RCMP files you want, let us get a database. Let us start finding our children. Well, that's like 3 years ago. You know, so I'm one voice, you know, and believe me, I can make noise, but it has to be done. We have to want this to end.
Exactly.
When you don't want healing upon land and people, you don't get it. But when we want it, change is made.
Absolutely. I mean, we just can't continue to put a bandage on the wound and think that it's gonna heal. And a lot of people want a quick fix. They want to throw money into these programs that never really reach the people. So they want to put a band-aid on it. And I mean, it's not a solution. It's not a long-term solution, because it's just trying to close the door and hide it under the rug or something like that.
Well, let me say that there are millions of dollars that are used by consultants for consulting the consultants to see how they will consult with those that need consulting. That's exactly what it is.
Absolutely.
It's just, and I've said that out loud, and I'm just, you want to hear the truth? You want to hear it from somebody who has fought tooth and nail to be recognized as a Canadian. I fought 11 years to get my Métis card. Well, you don't exist, they said. They kept saying, well, you don't exist, and your adoption was sealed. I said, I don't care. They're all dead. I said, my biological parents are dead and my adoptive parents are dead. I said, I think you can open the files now.
No kidding.
And they're like, no. So, but one thing I do want to say is that when I met my biological father, I was 24 years old. And he came to me, and he had tears running down his cheeks, and he said, you were so little. He said, you were only 3. He said, and I never saw you again. I came home, and you were gone. And I just hugged him. I never hated him. I loved him. What are you going to tell an adopted, a father that comes home, and your child is gone, and you think he's ever received an apology? No.
That is absolutely appalling. I can only imagine the emotions that he went through from the day you were 3 and you were taken till the day he finally met you. I mean, as a parent myself, I couldn't even begin to understand the hurt, the pain, the trauma that a parent would go through.
Well, it all comes down to it comes down to actually his power and greed, because that's what it was. We were sold on the market, let's put it that way. Let's not beat around the bush.
Well,
I mean, we're all...
It's almost like what's happening all over the place. It's a form of child trafficking. That's what it is.
100%. It is child trafficking. I am very grateful that I did not go into the sex slave, and but the emotional and mental and spiritual abuse. And I speak about this when I talk about the loss of identity. I said one of the biggest abuses to me is spiritual abuse, is when you break the spirit of another human being by whatever means possible, because that is not your right to break the spirit of another human being, and especially a little child.
Absolutely, that they don't have the authority, the power. It's just that's not they don't have the capacity to do that, but of course they've taken upon themselves to do that. And I think it's, like I've said to many people in various conversations that we've had with people, I mean, it has to be Métis people before profit. And until we get to that point, I mean, we're going to be going around in a vicious circle, and the pain, the wounds will not be, we can't dress the wounds if people don't want to acknowledge it, and they want to just throw money at it and say, okay, well, these programs, this and that. You're not dealing with the core issues of what it is. And I mean, people have to be able to speak and to tell their stories, because we'll just hear the stories of the government and the agencies that were involved when it's not really the truth. It's the truth as they see it, but it's not the truth and the trauma of the individual that had to live through that.
And it's amazing how you can shove a lot of stuff under the blanket of, and this is what I lived with growing up, under God's will. Whether it is a crime or not, it went under the magic carpet of this is God's will. Well, that's not the God that I serve. That is not the God, the Creator, the Great Spirit that I lean on and know has forever looked after me, because I wouldn't be here today. There is, I could have easily fallen into drugs and alcohol and given up when the church took my children for 2.5 years and told me that literally that I was not fit as a mother to have them, and I was going to hell. I did not deserve them. Who are you people? Like, what? And I've never, ever will I get an apology from the Holdeman Mennonite people saying, we were wrong. Because what would that be? That would be admitting to something that they would have to pull back out from under that carpet of God's will.
Well, if you want to look at somebody biblically that matches your story, except he was a lot younger, would be Moses. I mean, Moses, look at how he was raised, and he was raised completely opposite of who he was. And once he found out who he was, he went back to his community and became a leader in the community. And so
I never thought of that. But that's kind of cool. I never thought of that.
Yeah, and he was much older when he found out who he was, which is a lot of people that 60 Scoop survivors, like you say, they're older before they find out. And then it relates a lot to the story of Moses as well.
And you know what? The magic carpet of God and putting it under that carpet has been going on for centuries, and it's been used to murder innocent people, the atrocities, Spanish Inquisition, and then of course the residential schools, where you hear these stories of residential school victims buried in mass pits. You have little children being abused, killed, and I don't really think that's part of God's plan for children to be sexually abused, brutalized. They did experiments on them, nutritional experiments on them, keeping different things away from them. I really don't think that's what God had in mind. And again, like you said, they use that as a tool to say, well, it's God's will. I really can't believe, and no one's going to tell me different, that's what God would want, to do that to children, to be ripped from your family and thrown into a foreign environment, and saying that you're going to go to hell. I really don't think they have the capacity, and that's my opinion, to wield that judgment on somebody.
Well, you know what, you're exactly right. And that is probably one of the biggest reasons why I hold to what I lived through. I speak about this loss of identity and, finding that missing puzzle piece, because that's really what it is, especially for children that have been taken away. They want to know that they were part of something. I wanted to know. I used to go to bed at night all the time. What, was I too ugly? Didn't they want me? Where are they? Like, does nobody care? Like, why has nobody found me? Why has nobody come for me? I think that is one of the biggest gut-wrenching things that a child will ask is, why has nobody come for me?
Exactly.
And it's all about the money. It is, I don't care what, you can turn it every which way you want. You can look at the money today. There's millions of dollars within the Métis. There's millions and millions of dollars within the First Nation. You can throw all the money you want at people, but unless you deal with the heart issue, it'll never fix it. You're going to tell me you're going to give me $20,000 as a 60 Scoop survivor? That doesn't even cover a portion of the law fees, the lawyer fees I had to do to fight for my children. It's just ludicrous.
Well, I guess, you know, a lot of government agencies, they're just so used to throwing money at people and hoping that the problem will go away and it'll shut the person up. So again, that's the, you know, money is the magical Band-Aid.
Well, for those that are, again, you know, those that are all consumed with power and greed, yeah, money is amazing. But for those of us that have lived it and walked it and escaped from it and rebuilt our lives, I have the most incredible life. I have 5 amazing children. None of them joined that Holdeman church. They never wanted to be a part of that. They are all beautiful, strong individuals, and I'm so grateful, so grateful. But, you know, I wouldn't have that had I not gone through what I did. So you have to be willing to weigh the pros and the cons. And everything that I've gone through, what can I bring to the table now as a 60 Scoop survivor to help lessen the load and help people feel that they can talk about it and it's okay. It's okay to have anger. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to have no idea how you're going to survive. You know, they, like you said, you have these different money that is thrown at these different courses, but tell me how you're going to get those people, us 60 Scoop people, to those courses if we don't have a vehicle, if we don't have money for a bus fare, for a plane fare. You can have all these courses and all these, yeah, but you got to show up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
who's paying the bills? Who's putting food on the table?
Yeah.
They haven't thought the whole process through, so that's the problem. Where, you know, the whole pie or the whole circle hasn't been thought through, and you know, I think deep down, and this is again my opinion, I really don't think they want to resolve the issue. They just want it to go away as a dark part of history. I don't think they want to deal with it, because I think they see that, I mean, I don't think they're really prepared to deal with true healing. And that's not what they're there for, and they just wanted to, you know, shove it under the carpet again and not have people speak about it, and then they wonder why there's suicides, drug addiction, prostitution, alcoholism, homelessness. I mean, it's all part and parcel of trauma, and how people, you know, they don't have the coping skills to deal with the trauma. And I mean, you've got to give people the basic tools to begin to heal, you know, and the governments, and they're not doing that. And that's why I truly think that they just want this problem to go away. Everybody shut up about it, and they've heard enough about it, and move forward. But I mean, it's not addressing the core issues of what happened. And every individual that's gone through, whether it be 60 Scoop, residential schools, and all these sexual abuse and all that, everybody deals with it on their own level and differently, and have their own coping skills. So I mean, I think that they figured, well, you know, we don't have the time, the energy, we really want to, you know, deal with this issue. So again, that we're just gonna, like you said, do programs. Who cares if somebody can make it to or not? At least they've given you the option that there's a program out there, but not thought through, like, how are you going to get there and this and that. But they're just saying, well, we offered you a program.
Yeah. Well, you can't have unhealthy people trying to get people healthy.
Exactly. because I mean, you're really because you're not going to give them the proper support system, and support system can't just consist of money. You have to have people that, like you said, the greatest thing that you can really do is listen to somebody. Just let them get it all out. If they cry, they scream, they yell, stamp their feet, they sort of have to know that somebody is listening to them, and that they matter in the grand scheme of things, that they matter. And I mean, self-esteem issues and all this, it's a lifelong process to unlearn different behaviors and to try and heal. And my belief is healing is lifelong.
Oh, totally. And learning. I mean, living your life with self-worth and gratitude and communication changes the whole dynamic of your life. If anybody had, and I always say this, if anybody had an opportunity to wallow in self-pity and stay in the gutter and not want to pick me. But I didn't want that. I knew there was so much more out there. As a young girl, I remember just telling my adopted dad, because I went everywhere with him. I went to Brandon every week with a load of pigs. I rode in the big truck with him. I would go along. And we would stop for 80-cent cone of ice cream, which was like, to me, it looked like a foot high. I know it wasn't, but I was only 5, right, or 6. But any chance I got to go with my dad to Brandon, I'd help load the pigs, and I was just and my father, my adopted dad, spoke only Low German to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I always answered him in English. So for many, many years, I understood, and I still understand, they called it Plotich, which is a Low German. And in church, they would sing a High German. And so I knew, Dad would speak to me in Low German, and I would answer him in English. So we had this little, we were just so connected. I can't say anything more. I'm so honored to have him. Did he make mistakes? Absolutely. Did he ever hit me or punish me? Absolutely not. My adopted mother, different story.
Mm-hmm.
But my adopted father was my hero. He loved me. To be loved for just who you are is huge. And I wanted to, that is, I think, one of the biggest things that kept me fighting for my children and for my freedom was, like, I did not want them to grow up in the brainwashed dictatorship and have an arranged marriage. And to me, that wasn't a future.
Right.
They deserved higher education. They deserve to see the world. They deserve to know who they belong to and their history and where they come from, and to explore whatever life had for them, not be put inside this box and you're going to stay in here and you're going to learn this, and that's what it is. And that is what residential schooling was. We're going to make you good little, we're going to take the Indian right out of you, whether we got to cut your hair off or we got to beat you or we got to sexually molest you. Somehow we're going to get that Indian out of you, whether
Mm-hmm.
you're Métis or First Nations. And it's the repercussion of that is still going on. That cycle has to be broken.
Exactly.
And like I said, if I can speak in any way and be in help in any way through my book, when my book came out, I was really nervous because, number one, what's my adopted family going to say? They've already shunned me, so does it really matter? No, it doesn't. What are the people going to think? My biological family, what are they going to say? And the outreach from not only the adopted, the Holdeman Mennonite Society, I had many, many different religious background women that had left their, whatever it was, Mormon, Hutterite, Amish, different Seventh-day, the Jehovah Witness, they would come and speak to me and said, you know what you wrote was exactly what I experienced. And they said, we're so grateful to have been able to read your book. That's all that mattered. Wow. And it meant everything to me. Just if there was a connection in my book, that someone would know that they were not alone and that someone understood them, I had won. I have won. I feel like I've won the jackpot. I'm so grateful. And it's not that there aren't some great people, that are trying to do what's right with the 60 Scoop. There's amazing people, but the vast majority are so blindsided by power and greed that it's going to take some of us to really start banging some pans together to make stuff happen. Did have my books on Amazon. I think they're still on Amazon, as far as I know. They just look under A World Within a World Within a World, Shirleylee Shields, or you can look under Shirleylee Bercy. I have both names.
Okay, so what we'll do, if we find those books, we'll put them in the link to the description, and we'll also put your Gmail to the link to the description, because I'm assuming if they buy it from you, they'll be able to get a autograph or something, right?
Oh, absolutely. They'll all be autographed. If they order from me through my email, send me an email, or find me on Facebook, just under Shirleylee Shields. Send me a message. That's amazing too. I don't, if later somebody wants to text me, that's fine. But right now, I just have my Facebook and my email account.
But is there anything else you want to tell the people out there? Because we're running out of time right now.
Well, I just want to say that, especially those of us from the 60s Scoop, we all have a story and we all matter, and our voices need to be heard. And when we rise up and use our voice, that is when change begins to happen. And I am a very firm believer that the old prophecy is that a Native woman, First Nations or Métis, will heal the land. And I am a firm believer in that, because we as women are incredibly powerful, and we carry this essence within us that nobody will ever take away again. Those of us that have moved on from 60 Scoop survivor or residential schooling, or even any spiritual abuse or any form of abuse, there's healing there. We just got to really, really make our voice heard.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate being able to talk about this. I really do appreciate it.
And we appreciate you coming on the show and telling your story, and it'll inspire, we know it's going to inspire people to have their voices heard, because everybody is entitled to have a voice and should have their voice heard.
Yes.
And if you want to come back in the future on a different topic, please let us know, because you've been a great guest today. So.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this. And I know that lots of great things are happening down the line. We will see change. The change is already happening. This human trafficking has to be stopped on any level.
Yep.
All levels are bad. So
Absolutely.
I just want to be a part of this. I see so much goodness coming forward, and I want to be part of this big change that is going on. And you guys have an amazing voice too, and it needs to be told, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shirley. Thank you very much.
Okay, you have a good
All right,
day,
we'll
okay?
keep in touch.
Yeah, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
I hear you might want to cut that off. That was Shirleylee Shields joining us. It's a very deep topic there. I know that if anybody wants to reach out to her, she is a 60 Scoop survivor, and she'd be happy to discuss things with you.
Absolutely, because she will inspire many people. I had no idea about this Holdeman Mennonite cult in Manitoba, Roblin, Manitoba, and her story really began at the age of 3 when her and her brother were taken away from their home. Very chilling story, but I know a lot of people can relate on many different levels. And again, Shirley certainly will inspire other people to speak out and have their stories heard.
That's it for me.
Bye-bye.